Before we begin, please leave a comment, share your thoughts and let us know your lessons learned in the comment section below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Chief Bernard was not just one of the wealthiest men in Nigeria, he was a legend. His name was synonymous with success, power, and wisdom. The founder of the Bernard Group of companies. His empire spread across the country, from bustling cities to quiet rural areas. His businesses, his investments, and his intelligence had earned him not just wealth, but respect. Yet, there was something that even his millions could not compare to: his pride in his only son. Larry Bernard had been away for years, studying medicine at a prestigious university abroad. His father's hopes and dreams for him were grand. He had expected Larry to return as the perfect heir to his vast fortune. But Larry, though brilliant and handsome, had always been different from his father in one key way. Larry wanted something that Chief Bernard couldn't give him: true love. He wasn't interested in the shallow world of wealth and superficial admiration. Larry wanted to be loved for who he truly was, not for the fortune his father had built. He had seen enough of the fake smiles and empty flattery during his years abroad to understand how easily people could be swayed by money. Larry was tall, with smooth brown skin, curly hair, and a charming smile that could melt anyone's heart. Yet, despite his undeniable attractiveness, he had never been fooled by the attention of the women who flocked to him. To them, he was a prize to be won, not a man to be loved. And Larry knew it. He had no intention of marrying a woman who was more interested in his father's fortune than in him as a person. The day finally came when Larry was set to return to Nigeria. After years of studying, learning, and becoming a man of his own, he was coming home. His father, Chief Bernard, was ecstatic. He had been eagerly waiting for his son's return. But there was something else at play here. Something Chief Bernard had planned meticulously. As the plane touched down at Lagos International Airport, Larry's heart swelled with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. He had missed his home country. But he had also changed. The young man who had left was no longer the same. He had grown into someone who was determined to find something real. Something beyond the material world that his father had built. Chief Bernard was waiting for him at the airport, his face beaming with joy. The moment he spotted Larry walking through the arrival gates, he rushed forward and pulled his son into a warm embrace. "My son," Chief Bernard exclaimed, his voice full of pride. "You're finally home." Larry laughed, feeling the familiar weight of his father's embrace. "Yes, Dad, I'm back for good." That night, after a grand dinner held in his honor, Larry sat in the living room with his father. The room was filled with the scent of fresh flowers and the faint sound of laughter from family and friends. But Larry felt a quiet tension in the air. His father, always the man in control, seemed to be testing the waters, watching him carefully. "Son, you know that after graduation, you promised me you would find a good woman to marry, right?" Chief Bernard asked, his tone light but serious. Larry laughed softly. "Don't worry, Dad, I'll look for someone real when I get back home. I trust you, though." But Chief Bernard wasn't finished. "I've already spoken to 2 women. Larry, they both work in my company. And I think either of them would make a good wife for you. They are educated, respectful, hardworking, and, of course, beautiful." Larry raised an eyebrow, amused. "You've already chosen for me?" Chief Bernard chuckled. "Not chosen, son, just helping you along. You can still choose who you want. But I want you to consider these 2 women. Larry leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He knew his father's intentions were well-meaning, but he didn't want to be pushed into a relationship. He wanted to find someone who loved him for who he truly was, not just because of his family's wealth. And that's when the idea struck him. What if he could find out who truly cared about him without the influence of his name and fortune? A mischievous grin spread across Larry's face as he looked at his father. "Dad, I have an idea. What if I go home and pretend to be poor? What if I work as a security guard at your company? That way, I'll see who really loves me for who I am, not for the money." Chief Bernard's eyes widened in surprise. "What are you talking about, Larry?" "I'll dress as a security guard," Larry continued, his voice tinged with excitement. "I'll live in the boys' quarters, work at the gate, and see how people treat me. I want to know who really cares about me." Chief Bernard laughed heartily, clapping his hands in approval. "You're just like me when I was young. But are you sure about this? You want to go through all that trouble?" "Yes, Dad, Larry said, nodding firmly. I want real love, not fake love that disappears when the money runs out. This will be the best way to find out who truly loves me. The next morning, Larry's plan was set into motion. He dressed in a faded blue security uniform, a face cap, and worn-out sandals. He carried a broom and a bottle of water, looking every bit like a humble worker. Nobody at Bernard Group of Companies would recognize him. He was just another security guard. The first day was eye-opening. As Larry stood by the company gate, pretending to sweep the compound, he watched the staff walk past him without a second glance. Most of them didn't even notice him. But there was one person who did. Sandra, a beautiful and hard-working employee at the company, smiled at him as she walked by. Good morning, Ogre Security. She greeted him politely, her smile warm and genuine. Larry smiled back, surprised by her kindness. Good morning, madam. But then there was Jessica. She walked past him as if he didn't exist. Her eyes focused ahead, her nose slightly raised in the air. She didn't even acknowledge his presence. Larry chuckled to himself. This was going to be interesting. Over the next few days, Larry continued his disguise. He watched the way the two women behaved. Sandra treated him with respect, always greeting him with a smile, even bringing him cold water on a hot afternoon. Jessica, on the other hand, strutted around the office like she owned the place, acting as if she was already the future wife of the billionaire's son. Larry's feelings for Sandra began to grow. He admired her kindness, her humility, and her grace. She didn't care about money or status, she treated everyone equally, with respect. Meanwhile, Jessica's behavior only confirmed Larry's suspicions. She was vain, arrogant, and obsessed with money. It was clear that she was only interested in the idea of marrying into wealth. One afternoon, Larry overheard Jessica talking to her friends in the office cafeteria. Some people in this company better learn how to talk to me with respect, she said loudly, her voice dripping with arrogance. Very soon, I'll be the boss's daughter-in-law. Larry shook his head. He had seen enough. Sandra, with her quiet kindness and genuine heart, was the one who deserved his love. But Jessica, she had no chance. And so, Larry's plan continued. He remained in his disguise, watching, waiting, and learning more about the two women. The drama was just beginning, and he couldn't wait to see how it would unfold. But in his heart, Larry knew one thing for sure. True love would not come from wealth or status. It would come from someone who could see his heart before anything else. Little did he know, the journey he had started would soon lead to a life-changing revelation. And the truth would speak louder than anything his wealth could ever buy. The days passed by in a quiet haze. The sun rose and set, casting its warm glow on Bernard Group of Companies as the workers continued their usual routines. But for Larry, every day was a new act in the drama he had set in motion. He stood at the company gate, dressed as a security guard, observing everything with a keen eye. As he swept the compound, his thoughts were focused not on the task at hand but on the people who walked past him. The games had only just begun. Larry's heart, which had once been shielded by a wall of wealth, was now vulnerable to the things that really mattered: honesty, kindness, and love. And as he stood quietly, watching the behavior of the people around him, it became increasingly clear who had a true heart and who did not. It didn't take long for Jessica's true colors to show. She was an embodiment of arrogance, strutting through the office like a queen, her head held high, her perfume leaving a trail wherever she went. She spoke loudly, walked with purpose, and often gave orders as if she were already the wife of the richest man in the room. Larry couldn't help but notice how she always looked down on those who were beneath her, especially the workers who were there to do the jobs she considered menial. One afternoon, as Larry stood by the gate pretending to check the security register, he overheard Jessica speaking with two of her close friends in the office cafeteria. Her voice carried across the room, brimming with self-importance. Some people in this company better learn how to talk to me with respect, Jessica said, her eyes flashing with confidence. Very soon, I'll be the boss's daughter-in-law. Her friends gasped and clapped in approval. But Larry could sense the emptiness behind her words. It wasn't love she was after, it was power. She wasn't interested in knowing anyone for who they were. All she wanted was to marry into wealth and claim the title that would grant her a life of luxury. Jessica's presence in the company had become unbearable. She had started to act like she was already a part of the Bernard family. giving orders to everyone around her, including the cleaners and junior staff. She even began demanding that some employees be fired, certain that she would one day hold the power to make those decisions. But it wasn't just her attitude that made Larry uneasy, it was her complete lack of respect for people. One day, he watched as Jessica stormed past him at the gate, barely acknowledging him. She didn't even give him the courtesy of a greeting. He knew she wasn't even aware of his presence. But still, her behavior didn't sit right with him. Meanwhile, Sandra continued to be a refreshing contrast. Every morning, she would smile at him as she passed by. Always polite, always respectful. Her eyes never looked down on him. And she never treated him like he was beneath her. On one particularly hot afternoon, Sandra walked over to him, holding a bottle of cold water. "It's really hot out here," she said with a soft smile. "I thought you might need this." Larry took the water gratefully, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the sun beating down on him. "Thank you, madam. You're very kind." Sandra smiled, her expression genuine. "It's nothing. Just trying to make sure you're comfortable. Keep up the good work." As she walked away, Larry found himself watching her. There was something in her eyes. Something that made him feel seen, not for his wealth, but for who he truly was. There was no pretense in her actions. No hidden agenda. She simply treated him as a person. And in that moment, Larry realized that this was what true kindness looked like. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the office grew. Larry continued his disguise, taking note of everything, but it wasn't just the women he was observing. He had started to notice something more troubling, the way the office operated. The whispers behind closed doors. The gossip that seemed to fuel the workplace. It became increasingly clear that the company culture, for all its success, was driven by power and control, not respect. Jessica's behavior only escalated as the weeks went by. One afternoon, she walked into the office, her heels clicking loudly on the tiled floor. She was dressed to the nines in a tight red dress, her makeup flawless, her earrings nearly touching her shoulders. She strode through the office like she owned it, her eyes scanning the room for anyone who might dare to challenge her. When she passed by the reception desk, she saw Sandra talking to another staff member. Her eyes narrowed in annoyance, and she walked up to Sandra with an air of superiority. "Sandra," she said, her voice dripping with pride. "Can I talk to you for a second?" Sandra looked up at her, her expression calm and neutral. "Of course, Jessica. What's on your mind?" Jessica folded her arms across her chest, a smirk playing on her lips. "I think you need to stop trying so hard. You and I both know you're not my competition." Sandra's brow furrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" "Come on," Jessica said, rolling her eyes. "You know it as well as I do. Chief Bernard has already spoken to me. I'm the one he's chosen. I'm going to be his daughter-in-law. You should accept that." Sandra remained composed, her voice steady. "I'm not competing with you, Jessica. You can have him if you want." Jessica scoffed. "Good, you're finally speaking sense. But one more thing, Sandra. Don't ever forget that I'm on a whole other level than you." Sandra blinked, unfazed. "That's your opinion, but we're not in competition, Jessica." Jessica couldn't help herself, she couldn't stand being disregarded. "You'll see, I'm going to be the one who wins." But Sandra wasn't listening. She simply turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Jessica stewing in her frustration. Larry, who had been standing nearby, watched the exchange with growing concern. He had seen enough. He had been observing Jessica for weeks, and it was becoming more and more clear that her interest in him, or in anyone, was purely based on status. She didn't care about love, she cared about winning. And Sandra? She was different. She treated him with kindness. She didn't try to impress anyone. And she never sought validation from others. Larry began to realize that this was the kind of woman he had been waiting for, someone who didn't care about money. Someone who loved him for who he was. One afternoon, after another incident with Jessica where she publicly humiliated one of the junior staff members, Larry knew it was time to take things to the next level. He needed to confront the situation head-on. But before he could act, a conversation with his father shook him to his core. Chief Bernard, ever the observer, had been quietly watching his son's interactions. He had noticed the way Larry treated the staff with respect and humility. But he had also seen how Jessica had begun to act with increasing arrogance. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Chief Bernard spoke. "Larry," he said, his voice calm but serious. "I've been watching, and I know you've been testing the waters. But you've seen how things really are now. Do you want to go forward with this?" Larry looked his father in the eye, his expression unwavering. "I want to know who truly loves me. Dad, I want to see beyond the wealth, beyond the power. I don't want to marry someone who only wants me for my money." Chief Bernard nodded slowly, a proud smile tugging at his lips. "You've made a wise choice, my son." But Larry wasn't done yet. The drama, he realized, was just beginning. He still had one final test to pass, and he couldn't wait to see how it would unfold. The office was quiet. A hum of anticipation seemed to hang in the air, as though the walls themselves were waiting for the drama to unfold. Days had passed since Larry had begun his test, each moment filled with silent observations and subtle confrontations. But nothing could have prepared him for the moment when everything would change. When the truth, at last, would be revealed. Larry stood outside the conference room at Bernard Group of Companies. Dressed in his security guard uniform, he had spent weeks living this double life, pretending to be a nobody, just another face in the crowd. But today, the charade would come to an end. He could feel the tension mounting, the quiet beat of his heart matching the rhythm of the world around him. Inside the room, the staff were all gathered, murmurs and whispers filling the air as they awaited Chief Bernard's announcement. Larry had seen this all before, this anticipation, the eagerness in the air, but today was different. Today, the truth would come crashing down, and nothing would ever be the same. Chief Bernard stood at the front of the room, calm, collected, his ever-present aura of authority settling over everyone like a heavy cloak. He looked out over his employees, his gaze scanning the crowd. His smile was small but proud. "My dear children," he began, his voice smooth and deep, "I want to thank you all for your hard work and dedication. You have helped build this company into what it is today, and for that, I am grateful." The staff, as always, smiled and clapped, the sound filling the room with a sense of accomplishment. But Larry wasn't fooled. He could hear the subtle undertones, the whispers of greed and ambition. Some were here for the company's success, but others? They were only in it for the power and status that came with working for Chief Bernard. But today, Larry was no longer one of them. Today, the truth would come to light. Chief Bernard raised his hand, and the room fell silent. "As many of you know," he continued, "I have decided to retire. After years of hard work, I believe it's time to step back and enjoy the fruits of my labor. But that doesn't mean I will leave this company in the hands of just anyone. I've thought long and hard about this decision, and I've chosen someone who I believe is worthy of taking over." A collective gasp went through the room. It was as if everyone had been holding their breath, waiting for this moment. Who would it be? The person who would take control of Bernard Group of Companies? Everyone assumed it would be someone from the higher ranks, perhaps one of the managers. Someone with experience, someone who had already proven themselves in the business world. But when Chief Bernard paused and turned his gaze toward the door, the staff knew something was different. The door swung open, and Larry stepped inside. The room went completely still. It was as though time had stopped. The employees, who had been chattering just moments before, were now staring at him in disbelief. Larry, still dressed in his security guard uniform, stood tall at the front of the room. The only sound was the soft click of his shoes against the tiled floor as he walked confidently toward Chief Bernard. Jessica's eyes widened as she looked at him, her lips parting in shock. Sandra, on the other hand, merely raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at her lips. She had known something was different about him, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. And now, the truth was standing before her. Larry stopped beside his father, who turned to the crowd with a knowing look. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chief Bernard announced, his voice steady, "this is my son, Drive, Larry Bernard." A long silence filled the room. "You all know him as a humble security guard," Chief Bernard continued, his voice carrying through the tension in the air. "But what you didn't know is that Larry is not just the son of a wealthy businessman. He is a doctor, a man of great intelligence and integrity, and someone I am proud to call my son." Larry stood there, his eyes scanning the room, meeting the eyes of each employee as they processed the revelation. It was a moment of complete transformation. The world that had once seen him as just another worker, a nobody, now saw him for who he truly was, a man with power, with purpose. Jessica's face turned crimson with embarrassment. her mind racing as she tried to comprehend what was happening. She had been so sure, so convinced that she would be the one to marry into wealth. She had walked through the office, parading her supposed future status, believing it was only a matter of time before she became the wife of Bernard's son. But now, everything had changed. The man she had ignored, the man she had looked down on, was standing before her as the very person she had been vying for all along. Sandra, on the other hand, stood quietly, a smile spreading across her face as she watched Larry. She had never seen him as anything other than a man worthy of respect. Now, the world would see him for what he truly was, a man of substance. Larry turned to his father, a small grin playing at his lips. "Thanks, Dad," he said, his voice calm but full of emotion. "I appreciate you giving me the chance to be myself." Chief Bernard's smile was warm, filled with pride. "You've earned it, son. The world can see now that it's not wealth that defines a person, but their character." As the staff began to stir, the whispers started. Some were shocked, others embarrassed, but the ones who had truly respected Larry were nodding with approval. This was the man they had been working alongside, the man they had underestimated. And now, the truth had come out. But the drama was far from over. Jessica, still reeling from the shock, stood up abruptly, her eyes darting between Larry and Chief Bernard. "This is impossible," she muttered, almost to herself. "I didn't know." Larry, his expression calm and composed, turned to her. "You only respected me when you thought I had money. You didn't care about who I was as a person, Jessica. And now, here I am. It's too late to pretend." Her face flushed with fury. "You're lying. You're just trying to embarrass me. You can't be the same person I've been chasing. You're just a security guard." Larry stepped forward, his voice steady. "You've shown your true colors. Jessica, you only wanted to marry me for my wealth. You never cared about me. And now, you've lost everything." Jessica's eyes filled with tears of anger. "This is all a joke. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know who you really were?" she cried, desperation in her voice. Larry shook his head, his expression unreadable. "That's the problem, Jessica. You never cared to find out who I was. You only cared about what I could give you." The tension in the room was palpable. Chief Bernard watched, his eyes never leaving his son. "You've made your choice, Jessica," he said quietly, "and it's clear that you don't deserve a place in this family." Jessica was on the verge of tears now, her pride shattered, but she wasn't ready to give up just yet. "Please, sir," she begged, turning to Chief Bernard, "I can change. I just didn't know he was your son. Please don't." But Chief Bernard had heard enough. "No, Jessica, you've insulted my son. You've lied to my face. And you've shown who you truly are. It's time for you to leave." The room went dead silent as Chief Bernard motioned for the guards. Without a word, they stepped forward and escorted Jessica out of the building. She looked back once, her face red with humiliation. But there was no turning back. The gates closed behind her, and she was gone. Larry turned to Sandra, his face softening. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere, "for everything." Sandra smiled, her eyes full of understanding. "You didn't have to prove anything, Larry. I always knew the truth." With Jessica out of the picture, the air in the office felt lighter, more peaceful. The workers, who had watched the drama unfold, now returned to their duties. But the atmosphere had changed. They saw Larry differently now, not as a security guard, but as the man he had always been. A man of integrity, of character. Later that evening, Chief Bernard and Larry sat together in the living room, the weight of the day slowly lifting off their shoulders. "You did well, son," Chief Bernard said, his voice full of pride. Larry smiled, his eyes glinting with something deeper than just victory. "This is only the beginning, Dad." And as they sat there, the future seemed full of promise. Larry had found what he was looking for, a love built on trust, respect, and honesty. And in the end, that was worth far more than any wealth could ever provide. Little did they know, the final chapter of their story was just about to begin, and it would be filled with more love, surprises, and triumphs than either of them could ever have imagined. Thank you so much for watching this incredible journey unfold. We hope you enjoyed every twist and turn of the story, and that it left you with something to reflect on. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the story. So feel free to leave a comment below and share your feelings with us. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us create even better content for you. Thanks again for being part of this adventure. And stay tuned for more amazing stories.